Hey everyone, what's up? It is Finch here, and we're back with yet another video on Scarlet and Violet Overused. Before we get into our topic, I just want to say I hope everyone is doing well and enjoying the metagame. Personally, I have been quite a bit, especially after this most recent wave of bans. If you guys didn't know, Palafin and Iron Bundle were both banned to Ubers, both very, restrictive, limiting presences, so I'm really glad about that. I feel team building has opened up, and there are a lot of new toys to explore with. Personally, I've been trying all sorts of Pokemon that I didn't even think would be viable, and it's crazy how actually pretty good they are, especially things like, the starters like Meowscarada and Skelridge. It's just awesome seeing the metagame take this development. So I just want to say, have fun. That is what this all is about after all, Click away from this video, grab a ladder game or two, just chill, That's what we're going for right now. But anyway, let's get into our main topic, and that's going to be terrestrialization. This is the big bad Finch discusses the main core mechanic of the generation video. I know a lot of people have been waiting for it. We recently, as in Saturday morning, we posted a thread, and as I'm recording this is Monday night, and the thread in the OU forum already has 24 full pages. I believe it's 25 posts. We've got like 500 posts on the topic in less than 60 hours, to put it that way. We're getting a lot of posts. It's at an alarming rate. And we also have another specific thread in a policy review thread, subforum, which is dedicated to badge hold users. I'm looking at both threads because I care about what the public says. I care about what the more experienced players have to say. I think we could factor in both, but neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and start the video by introducing terrestrialization for those that are either less familiar, want a refresher, or just want it broken down one more time. So, you have 6 Pokemon on your team, right? And any of them can terrestrialize, but only one of them can throughout the course of a battle. So all 6 of them have the capability to, and it's your choice which one is going to, and you make that choice during the battle, not before the battle. And they also all have a Tera type, which you again decide on Pokemon Showdown in the team builder, or in game you do it through whatever means is applicable. I haven't actually played through the game yet, so let me know how you do that in the comments. I'm actually kind of curious. I'm assuming it's some sort of breeding thing, but interesting nonetheless. Anyway, so they have a Tera type. This type, after terrestrialize, will become your sole defensive typing. So, for example, if I have a Dragonite out, I am a Dragon and Flying type. But if I terrestrialize into a Steel type, then I will only be a Steel type defensively. However, that Steel type might be only typed defensively, meaning that suddenly you resist Fairy, but you take super effective damage from Earthquake. But it's not your only stab, stab being the same type attack bonus. You would still gain that 1.5 times boost from moves like Dragon Claw, or any flying type move. In addition to that, though, you would gain that same type attacking boost on any steel type move. Or, if you want to do Terra Normal, you'd gain that same type attack boost on something like Extreme Speed, and so on and so forth. That becomes your Terra type. So, essentially, if you want, you can have a third stab attacking type, while also totally morphing your defensive typing. It's a very unique concept. We haven't seen anything like this in competitive Pokemon history, or really Pokemon history, so hats off to Game Freak for coming up with such a novel idea. On top of this, you also have a boost to like adaptability if you would like to go with a stab type as your Tera type. So for example, if I am a Dragonite and I want to go with Tera Dragon or Tera Flying, then my Dragon type would be my only defensive typing. I'd go Mono typing, but that would still retain that Dragon typing, but also I would get double stab on it. I would essentially have adaptability. That is how it would work. The boost roughly evens out that way. And adaptability, for those who don't know, is an ability that makes your same type attack bonus basically 2 times modified instead of 1.5 times, which is a big boost. You see things like Porygon Z with that, or Dragalge with that, really strong special attacking presences. Finally, and probably honestly the least impactful of all of this, is Tera Blast is a novel move to the game, which is basically an 80 base power move that takes the form of your strongest or weakest, your strongest attacking stat. So Dragonite's probably going to be attack, but something like a strong special attacker, let's say a Specs Dragapult, is going to be special attack, although it seldom runs Tera Blast. This is an example. 80 base power of that typing. So it's basically like a stronger, suddenly stab boosted hidden power. That makes sense to you guys? If not, let me know anything down in the comments below. I want to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about before we get into this discussion. So I will try and respond to comments, and if you want to reach me specifically, my DMs are always open on Twitter, Smogon, or Discord. I'm trying to be as accessible as I can here as a cheerleader, so I hope that information helps you there. Anyway, we've been now in a metagame for about 10 days. we've had a couple of bans, and a lot's gone on. There's been lots of discussion. I've posted hundreds of times. Other people have posted so many times. I've played so many games and so on and so forth. And now we're getting to the point where the dust is starting to slowly but surely settle. We certainly aren't at a stable point, though we aren't even close. The metagame is still evolving daily, so let's not pretend that things are getting stagnant, but quite on the contrary, the metagame is at least starting to take some shape. We're starting to figure out what's good and what's not good. We're starting to figure out what Pokemon work well together and maybe not so much. We're starting to figure out what the best sets are and things. And it's more of a start to an end, but it's definitely a start. So, given that, we can kind of have a basis of a conversation on, what's good and what's bad in the metagame. And one constant as to what's good in the metagame is terrestrialization. It has always been a focal point, especially of more offensive games. But also, it completely dwarfs things defensively as well. And that's where it kind of gets crazy, because as I mentioned before, you have that defensive element where you change your stab typing, so if I'm that Dragonite and I'm facing a Fairy type like click Moonblast against me, I become a Steel type or a Fire type, suddenly that's not going to do much to me and I basically have a free turn, especially with multi-scale. Or if I'm facing an Ice type, same ordeal. Alternatively, if I'm facing something that I really need to bolster my attack against, like say a faster Pokemon, and my ability to damage them is Extreme Speed, if I go Normal type, I can suddenly wipe them out with a stronger boosted Extreme Speed with an extra Stab type, and then I don't even have to worry about them, and also I lose my weaknesses because I'm a Normal type, unless it's Fighting move, of course. So you see here how it kind of goes well-rounded, just with that Dragonite example alone. Imagine that amplified and applied to every single Pokemon, because truth be told, the metagame has dozens and dozens of Pokemon that are capable of using terrestrialization. And you see how complicated it gets, and how many different applications of it. And now, instinctually, I think we're all kind of inclined to say, oh, cool, that's such an awesome mechanic. I've never seen anything like this. I want to try this out. How can I get going? And the answer to that is Pokemon Showdown. There are plenty of OU resources. You should try and build your own team with your favorite Pokemon and see how it goes in the ladder. And I implore all of you to do that, by the way. Go load up a couple OU games. Do your best. Have fun right now. Even if it's not going to lead to a lot of winning, it's just a super fun time. But regardless of that, once you dig deeper, and you start noticing some, dare I say, constraints that terrestrialization imposes upon the metagame. Getting back to that Dragonite example, if you terrestrialize into a Steel type, let's say I click Dragon Dance against a Pokemon I'm good against, I'm doing well against, and they suddenly switch to their checker, their counter, their Ice type, their Fairy type, their Rock type, something like that. And then they try and click a super effective move to try and, beat me, or at least break my multi-scale to the point where I'm going to be, able to die next turn. If I switch to a totally different typing, I get a second Dragon Dance or a chance to get an attack off without taking much damage. That's a big, big, big problem to the defensive Pokemon. And you might be saying, oh, cool, Finch, I'm getting free turns with my setup sweeper, that's awesome. But what if your opponent does that with their setup sweeper? What if they also have a strong Pokemon like, say, a Roaring Moon, and they click Dragon Dance as you go to your own Fairy type, and then suddenly they terrestrialize into a Flying type, and they get the booster energy boost with Acrobatics, and they get a Stab Acrobatics, and even if they can't kill your Fairy type, or your Ice type, or your Flying type in one hit, necessarily, when they probably can for most of them, because +1 Stab boosted itemless Acrobatics is ridiculously strong, then they can potentially neutralize a Fairy type attack that would have been 4 times super effectively, or resist a Fighting attack that would have been 2 times. And suddenly, that counterplay doesn't actually work as counterplay anymore. And you see how this, in my opinion, can prove to be a little worrisome, a little troublesome, in that there's no direct line of counterplay. Now, the natural progression to that would be, hey, Finch, you can predict around this. You know that Roaring Moon is likely to run Flying. You know that Dragonite is likely to run Steel or Normal or Fire, and so on and so forth. And to that I say 100% true. I tip my hat to you. You are right. That could be a natural part of the game, except when we've got so many scary, awesome Pokemon, and we don't want to ban them all. We certainly do not. We don't want to restrict all of these offensive options, and we don't want to decreep the metagame either, because if you do that, then the next most strong options are just going to take their places, and then we're just banning things for the sake of banning things, and that's silly. Maybe the common thread between all these things is terrestrialization. And to an extent, unfortunately, that is true. But how do I put it? See, if you know who the terrestrialization user is, if you know it's going to be the Roaring Moon, at least you don't have to play around the other 4 or 5 threatening Pokemon on that team clicking that move. Or, sorry, clicking that Tera button and becoming a different type. You could hone in on it, and you could really frame your game plan around it. But if anyone can do it at any point in time, then it's looming overhead, and it's almost as if there's so much inherent guesswork just to checking or countering a Pokemon, to clicking a move that you think is a no-brainer. Suddenly, every turn has so much weight, it's almost like playing, slots. And it's obviously Pokemon, and there's so much more decision-making, strategy, and whatnot, but it is true that having the ability to change type on whim like that adds a strategic element to the game, absolutely, but it also makes it some more guesswork, especially if someone doesn't terrestrialize until later in the game, because you have that in your mind, making every single play conscious, every single decision all game long, and when the reward outweighs the risk by such a large amount, because you gain another stab and you lose all your weaknesses, and people are kind of conditioned to expect you to be straightforward, suddenly it completely changes how we think about the game, how we view counterplay, and if counterplay even exists. Suddenly it devolves the game into more guesswork, more conditioning and psychological stuff, which I don't even think is necessarily bad, and less conventional outplaying. Suddenly it makes it so that you've got to really focus on, defensive condensing of different threats, because suddenly your Dragonite can take a different typing. You got to cover that too on top of the normal set, So we're seeing the metagame kind of warp around that. And because of that, a lot of setup sweepers that get free turns, they're still walled by unaware Pokemon, so we're seeing a lot of stall with unaware Pokemon, which, okay, I don't love that. I don't love that the metagame's already warping into more extremes, but maybe that's inevitable. I don't know. And truth be told, I think the ability to change stab type is definitely, worrisome. I think it's definitely an uncompetitive dynamic of Trash Solution, but I think the rest of it is still really welcome in the metagame. I think that if you can, limit it to a Pokemon, and they can change types, it's that Pokemon, then suddenly at least okay, there's a finite number of possibilities. Or if you limit stabs, there's a finite number of possibilities. And yeah, you could say, but Finch, there's a finite number of possibilities anyway. You can only do so many types, and you only have 6 Pokemon. That's true, but accounting for every single one of them, every single possible type, some of these Pokemon can run 3 or 4 different Tera types effectively, and they can be catered to a matchup. It does add a layer of strategy, but it also adds a layer of guesswork, and I think that guesswork is a little tough. So, in my opinion, there is merit to the discussion of the tiering of terrestrialization. And in my opinion, extended to that, I think something should be done. But I don't think we should do an outright ban. I think the mechanic deserves to be in SVOU, at least for the foreseeable future, for the next couple weeks or couple months, so that we can really get a gauge in it. Because it's too early to outright ban this. So let's discuss why some people want an outright ban and why I don't agree with that. Because that is one of the most common thoughts among people on Smogon and Pokemon Showdown. I've seen a lot of posts supporting it. A lot of people want it because it gives a clean slate. It makes it so that the generation doesn't get marred by the guesswork I just alluded to. And it doesn't overly creep the metagame in terms of power either. Even just having stab terrestrialization can arguably be very strong. Adaptability is a strong ability. Giving it to every single Pokemon potentially on top of their previously existing strengths and weaknesses is just really a lot. And I get that. And they're trying to say, hey, this mechanic is geared more towards doubles formats, which it is. And it isn't necessarily designed to be a part of Smogon singles inherently, which it's not. And therefore, it's okay to get rid of if we see it as excessive. And given the results, it has been excessive. And yes, it has been excessive, but not to the extent, in my opinion, that we can't restrict it rather than ban it outright. Just to read through what was written, an outright ban in terrestrialization will remove the concept from the metagame. It's a nuclear option, if you will. There's been a significant amount of buzz surrounding it and being removed from the metagame. A lot of them comes down to, if an outright ban happens, then it's because we view the whole concept as uncompetitive. And in terms of practical level, a lot can be said to it. Terrestrialization fundamentally alters how we approach handling a wide array of threats, be it through, again, a countering, oh my god, I gotta cover a Steel-type Dragonite, or I gotta cover a Flying-type Roaring Moon, and so on and so forth, It's very hard to blank all of these options. It presents dynamic offensive presences coupled with varied defensive presences. And I think this argument has some mention, has some weight to it, but no, I can't agree. I think it's too early in the generation to outright ban the mechanic. I think we have to do our work as a community to try and preserve it. However, in preserving it, I do believe that there is to be some notes of restriction. I feel as if Terrestrialization, as it currently stands, leads to a more hectic, non-competitive metagame state rather than a competitive one. I think a lot of games are coming down to 3-turn sequences or guesswork on a single turn, or a couple of conditioning rounds, and so on and so forth, rather than whole game planning. I think team building is inherently incomplete and ramshackled with just a slew of restrictions due to the presence of a back setup sweeper potentially terrestrializing at the wrong time for you, and being able to have these contingency plans surrounded by these checking these strategies. And role compression is limited more than ever before, forcing us to use things like unaware or an abundance of priority, or even things like ditto, for example. And even then, you don't necessarily find yourself in a free-flowing state of balance either. And that alone is quite the restriction set as is. So saying that you might need even more than that goes a long way. So in my opinion, banning it outright is excessive. Banning it outright will lose a lot of interest in more casual players. And maybe restricting it will also do that, but at least it preserves it in the metagame. It gives this metagame a unique spice, and in my opinion, we owe it to our player base to at least try something of that nature. So, moreover, there have been some options listed that could potentially form as ways to be save terrestrialization, and those are showing Tera type at team preview, limiting the amount of Pokemon that have access to it during the game, limiting it to stabs, banning Tera Blasts. So let's go through them one by one. So the first one is showing a Tera. Is that first? Yeah, first one is showing a Tera type at team preview. So this would essentially be a handshake agreement to tell everyone, oh hey, my Dragonite is Tera Steel, my Roaring Moon is Tera Flying, and so on and so forth for your other 4 Pokemon. Again, I'm trying to stick with those 2 examples just to paint a picture in your guys' mind. The issue with this is that handshake agreements aren't always binding and shouldn't be something we necessarily rely on for a whole generation's defining core mechanic. It feels like a bit of a loose ban, and on top of that, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem, as you still have all 6 Pokemon being able to change type at any point in time. It feels like it's surface level going to make it better, and I do agree it would be an improvement from the norm, but I think this departure would not be a sufficient one. I think it wouldn't change the dynamic much. It wouldn't necessarily move the needle, and on top of that, I think that the justification for it is more limited than you'd like. So I think in terms of application, I think it's insufficient, and I think in terms of concept and contextualization within our tiering system, I don't think it would necessarily be the best option. Let's move down the list. Limiting the amount of Pokemon on any given team that have access to potentially terrestrialize during a battle. I think this is probably my second favorite restriction. I think that having only one Pokemon be able to terrestrialize suddenly makes it a lot more predictable. Even if you don't know what type it is, you know it's that Pokemon. You can potentially cover that if you don't have the thought looming overhead all game, just by a little more preservation and a little more aggressive play at the right times. I think this would actually stimulate some really productive play. However, much like the last one, it would certainly cause a bit more inherent restriction. It would certainly cause a bit of a shakeup in terms of being, a loose, wobbly agreement that you can replicate on cartridge, but it's just a handshake agreement's pretty flimsy, unfortunately. I do think that this, aside from that ideological issue, is fine though, and I personally would be fine with trying a metagame with that. I think it'd be an awesome concept. I think that might actually save the metagame, and it still gives some room for really awesome synergy and strategy in the builder. And then there's the option of keeping it on all 6 Pokemon, but making it so that you could only do a terrestrialization type that matches your stab type. So Dragonite can only do Dragon and Flying, Roaring Moon can only do Dragon and Dark, and so on and so forth, keeping it true with those examples. I think this is my favorite, because this isn't something you need to have some sort of handshake agreement on. This is just something you, on your own end in the team builder, can be forced to select, and therefore it doesn't require any modification, doesn't require any agreement. It just is something that's inherently ruled upon. And I think this is a step up. Obviously, there's some still ideological concerns when it comes to just any sort of restriction. It's not how the game initially intended, and I get it. There are some purists out there, and I 100% resonate with the fact that limiting it at this point, I'd rather just it be there or not be there, why go in the middle? And I think going in the middle is important, because it matches the concerns of a great portion of our player base that really do see it as problematic. And as you see, if you look on, Smogon forums, or you look in the OU room, or you look on Twitter, a lot of people are concerned about the mechanic warping the metagame. but it also saves it to an extent. At least makes it playable in the metagame, and of course on each and every single team. So you can match it up with, the players who really want that flair, want that generation-defining mechanic, and I think it gives the best of both worlds. I think it'll make it so that this metagame is more exciting, more flavorful than past metagames, and I also think that would really seal the nail in the coffin on the narrative that, oh, Smogon just wants to ban phone because, dude, I want to have fun. I want this mechanic. I'm bending over backwards to try and preserve it because otherwise it's going to get nuked to hell. So hopefully we can, do this or the last one. Those are my two favorites. Again, banning non-stab terrestrialization, personally my favorite. And then we got a couple other options here. Banning Tera Blast, which Tera Blast has been pretty underwhelming so far. I'll be honest, it doesn't really move the needle. Banning Tera Blast just doesn't actually change anything. And then no tiering action, which again, I think that right now we're probably in need of some semblance of tier action. I'm just not sure how strong, how weak. So we'll it's always an option. If most people think it's okay, maybe I'm overreacting. That's fine. Ultimately, this is not going to come down to me or to the council. It's going to come down to community vote, a suspect test. And it's also going to be a longer 3-week suspect test that gives more people a chance to get Rex and spend their time on this and decide a generation defining mechanic. Because it shouldn't be me or 5 or 10 guys in a room deciding this. It should be a whole community-wide process where all the people who qualify can get Rex. And I strongly implore people to try that come then. In addition to that, I want to note that we're not rushing to do anything at all. This thread is going to be open for at least another week from now. Week from it started, but also it's going to be open a week from now. I can't see us doing a suspect in the next 5 to 10 days. I see one more like the early middle to middle of December, if anything. And also, if we do a suspect and some action happens, there's a chance we resuspect it in the future, so people can see the metagame with it restricted or without it. So then in a couple months, say in March or April, we have another suspect test after the release of Home, and then people could really make a final determination on it. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that, but it's certainly on the table because we really want to be cautious about this. We really want to see what we can preserve. We want to see how this metagame can form around the mechanic, with the mechanic, or potentially without the mechanic, depending on how it goes. We just want to keep an open mind and let the players decide it from there, and I think that's the best I can do. As a player, I'm entitled to my personal opinion and my vote once I get Rex, but I'm not any different than anyone else in this dynamic. We're probably going to have a suspect. I'm just letting you know now. I don't know what the verdict's going to be, but I personally hope it's not outright banned. I hope we have terrestrialization in the metagame, and I hope you guys have your own opinions and let me know down below in the comment section. Let me know on Twitter or Smogon as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you do enjoy. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, have a great day. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye.